Hello, class. This is your first content. This is what are books for? So we have some essential questions. What is a book? What are the categories of books? And what is the purpose of books? And we have one of my favorite books over there on the right, which is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. It's a classic. And it's short and it's fun. So what is a book? A book is a collection of visual information. The information can be text or images or a combination. They can be written by one person or they can be written by many people working together. They can take lots of different physical forms. This is another classic book, The Art of War. It's a very old book that is translated from the Japanese, and it's philosophy about how to be a good leader. It's another thing that's really worth reading and studying. So we're going to look at some categories of books. There's more categories, but we're going to divide them into 4 types. And you probably know this stuff from English class, at least I hope you do. Nonfiction, fiction, albums, and personal. And on the right, we have another favorite book from being a little kid, The Grouchy Ladybug. There's also The Hungry Caterpillar and other books by Eric Carle. I really like The Grouchy Ladybug best because she's just cranky all the time. I hope I'm not cranky all the time. Okay, so nonfiction is books that contain information that is accepted as true. Notice that doesn't mean that it is true, because truth changes over time. For example, textbooks. Textbooks, like you have here at school, they contain information, and we will say, looking back at early textbooks, and we might say early textbooks had some things about genetics in them that later on they found out wasn't exactly how it worked, with updated knowledge about things like DNA and RNA and all those things. So what was considered to be the truth back then, we now know wasn't quite the truth. Encyclopedias, which are collections of information about everything. I know you guys all know what Wikipedia is online. And just like in the meme there, before internet, when I was a kid in high school and stuff, none of that existed. And if you had to do research for a class, to write a paper, answer a question or whatever, you had to go to the library. You had to know how to find the books that had the information in it, and then you had to go through the book and find the information that you wanted, and then you had to read it. It wasn't a matter of, hey, Google, tell me about cats, or what have you. Academic manuscripts are things like papers and whatnot that are written in school. Academic manuscripts are professionally written papers like you would do in college, or as people who professionally study things. Dictionaries, collections of words and their meaning. Handbooks and field guides, which explain how to do something, or field guides identify, like birds, trees. Manuals are what you read in order how to use something, and basically they're the instructions, like your car has a manual. An atlas is maps, and then there's cookbooks with recipes, how-to books, which are like the DIY books, all of those types of things. Fiction books are invented and created literature. So this includes novels, which are long stories, short story collections, which is a group of short stories, poetry, novellas, which there's usually 2 or 3 combined together. They're longer than stories, shorter than novels, graphic novels, comic books, and the subject matter of these books is called the genre. Like, for example, the Lord of the Rings books that I have over on the right, which are still some of my absolute favorite books ever. Those fall into the fantasy genre. And then you might have the Western genre that are books about the West and cowboys, sports, romance, mystery, crime, whatever. Albums are visual collections. So albums include things like photographs, scrapbooks, collections of things that you would paste down, like when people collect stamps off of letters, which you don't get as much of anymore because you guys don't get letters. You would take the stamp off and glue it into your album. Some people do this with labels, ticket stubs, yearbooks. On the right here I found this on eBay. It's a Trask 2013 yearbook. It's being sold for $25. Portfolios, which would be collections of your art or somebody else's art. And autograph books, which was an extremely popular fad in like the 1950s, where people would collect the autographs of famous people. So if you saw a celebrity, you would go up and ask them to sign this piece of paper, and they might just write their name, or they might write a little note to you, and those are actually quite valuable. Personal books are an individual's personal reflections. So diaries are associated more with private emotions and events. Diaries are normally not meant to be shared with people. They're private. Journals record events and can include those personal perspectives and emotions, but they can be intended to be shared publicly. They can be a part of work or school. They can be documenting an experience. There's something that you're often asked as you go on with education to keep track of. When you're in a class, is to keep a journal of your reflections and ideas. In the workplace, people keep journals or logbooks about what happens during the day at work. Sketchbooks and visual journals. We do a lot in here. A lot of you have done this before with the art classes. It's creative recording of visual exercises, artwork, observations, events, and things. All my sketchbooks are the ones I have here on the bookcase behind my desk. If you want to look at them, that's fine. Just ask, and I will let you get one, and you can look at it. You can't take it home with you, but you could look at it here and then put it back, and I'll let it sit around to wait. It's 5 days to be disinfected. And then notebooks are personal collections of information. These are often done as part of study, part of school. You have all done this before for other classes where you have a notebook and you write down information as you're learning it. So, purposes of books. Their primary purpose is communication. It can be communication of knowledge, where you're either recording things that are happening or you're writing down things that, are found out for future people to read. They can be communicating your ideas, philosophies about how the world works, religious ideas, inventions, your observations, imagination, which is what comes into the fictional things like novels and poetry, and much more. They can also, as you see on the right, you notice that the women have books on their heads, and I don't think they do this much anymore, but this was something I remember doing it in gym class when I was in school. you had to be able to walk around with a book on your head. It was to improve your posture because you have to balance that book. And we had to do laps around the gym with books on our head. Yeah, you should tell one of the coaches to try that. That'd be cool. So communication books were invented as a way to organize and store information and collect it together. So you didn't have 26 million clay tablets or parchment scrolls laying around. And that way the information would not be lost when the person who was writing it died. It would be preserved for others, and it became part of the knowledge of the world, and it's how we know what happened in the past. So your assignment for today, and you just need a Chromebook and a Google Doc, and it's your connection question. All of you have been in school a really long time because you're in high school, and you've had to read lots of books. And I want you to think back to the whole time that you were in school and pick out one nonfiction and one fiction book that you had to read for school. Not just because you wanted to, but it was something that you had to read for school. Don't just choose a textbook, a book. So think about the things that you read in like English class. In your Google Doc, I want you to write down the title and the author. You probably may not remember the author, so look that up. And then I want you to tell me why you think that we being teachers, made you read it. What was the purpose of the book that made it so important that of all the books, all the billions of books in this world, you had to read this specific book for class? Okay? Because there's probably a reason. All right? And then turn it in.